Welcome to Merchman Seeds Cup of Joe. On this episode, here's some wheat news from harvest in the south to new wheat varieties down the pike. We have a discussion on the effects of GDU accumulation on delayed planting and replanting corn. We talk about the impact of hail on corn and soybeans and whether or not to put fungicide on. And here's some recommendations from Turk regarding bins, a marketing plan, and side dressing.
Hi, welcome to Merchman Seeds Cup of Joe. Today we have Lynn and Turk, and we're going to start off with some exciting fun news. Lynn, you want to take us off?
Harvest has started. So we got some wheat reports coming in already down in southern Illinois. Merchman dealer is taking off some wheat right now, so running in the upper 70s. Test weight's running around 57 pounds, moisture sub 14. So really good time to get that off there for them and take it right to the elevator if needed, or put it into storage and not have to worry too much about running fans. So we're looking at we're not even in June for this report.
It's going to be a record early, doesn't it, Ben?
I think it's got to be record early. I've talked with people in the industry that have been in the industry 20 plus years, and they have never seen wheat come off this early. So it's exciting. It also is a little bit of a testament to our ultra earlies. I'm not sure if he was the individual customer was running our Binti product or if he was running the new hyper early Millie product, because I know we got him some of the Millie to test out, see how things were going. To get even a little bit earlier. So I think part of that's a testament to the wheat varieties as well. But the majority of it is Mother Nature.
Correct. So when we look at that, what does that mean to everyone else is if you haven't gotten your combine out and started looking over, I would be doing it very, very soon, because we're seeing it from northern Illinois to southern Illinois that wheat varieties we're starting to see the senescence in our hyper earlies and our ultra earlies. Around here locally, that you said that some of the seed production stuff is looking like it's going to be trending ahead of schedule for normally around the 16th is when seed production tends to hit West Point.
On our lighter soil types, on our sandier soil types, we can get our hyper earlies and our ultra earlies off like the 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th, somewhere in that time frame. So I foresee it to be a little bit earlier than that this year. I was checking. We have 4 new hyper earlies that we haven't released yet. We're probably going to pick 1 or 2 of those products to jump into the lineup for next year. And they are starting to turn. They're starting to fire from the bottom. They look phenomenal for a standability standpoint. They look phenomenal from a yield standpoint. So we're really excited about those too. So.
Well, they say when wheat starts turning, you go fishing for 2 weeks and come back and you're ready to go.
That's about right. Yep. It's typically from flower period. It's usually about 30 to 35 days from flowering by the time it's ready to harvest. So I think there'll be a lot of guys within the next 2 weeks that are definitely looking at it, thinking about it a lot harder than where they are. And how crazy is that with the year Mother Nature gave us this year compared to last year. We're going to be having first crop beans going in the ground. That's not like floodplain ground. We're going to have first crop beans going in the ground from the guys that have been delayed. We're going to have wheat combines rolling, and we're going to have double crop beans all happening at the same time.
Yeah, I'm assuming if they're chasing the planter at the time of this recording, I was a little bit late coming in the office because I just finished up planting my first stuff. So we got guys combining wheat, and here in southeast Iowa planting beans for the first time. And like you said, this isn't floodplain ground waiting for the water to come off. It's just a very unique year with how the weather has turned out. I know a little bit to the west of where this wheat is, they're kind of in the same situation as we've been. If they go 3 days without some form of precipitation, it's been a pretty wild spell there. So more rain on the forecast for everyone across our growing areas as well. So like you said, it's going to be a really exciting June for Merchman Seeds and all of our customers as we get into wheat harvest, ending first plant, starting the double crop acres, and hopefully not too much replant going on.
Yep, you're absolutely right.
And there's some corn being switched to beans too as well, isn't there, Ben?
Yeah, I had some questions from a customer that was in that would have been in Keokuk County, Iowa, that was quizzing me on whether to switch corn acres to soybean acres that had gotten flooded out. And with the varieties that we have going down to 108 day, and we showed that tool a month and a half ago on Cup of Joe between the Purdue tool, talking about how a corn plant just won't produce that a leaf or two, and it speeds along the maturation process or the maturing process to get it through. So if our 108 day is actually acting like 105 day from a growing degree standpoint to get it to black layer. It's putting the black layer date real close to where the average final freeze date is. So you can take one of two options at that point, and we weren't really planning on talking about this, but like you can stay at that 108 day, which is on early but normal maturity for this area. It's kind of on the earlier side, but a normal maturity. Or you can roll back into 102 day, and we'd be able to get that from Stein if we needed it, because we're Stein distributors for corn. But that's really where you're starting to take the yield hit is, you know, the 10th of June planted, because some of these fields are still wet from flooding out. You know, there's a huge difference between June planted corn and June 1st planted corn and June 10th planted corn when it comes to when that product's going to black layer, and that's because the GDUs just flatline at a certain point. You're not accumulating in the same rate from an average over the 20-year period. I
think part of that too is what you have to watch when you're in those situations, and unfortunately I've learned this the hard way with real life experience, is that it's not so much to your GDU point on the front end, it's the back end. You're almost tripping over your own feet to accumulate any GDUs post black layer, and what you run into in that situation is you might hit black layer, but then you're just not getting enough heat to push that from 28 to 32% down to, if you have a dryer and want to run it through at 25, or unfortunately if you're one of those guys that don't, you want to try to take it in, you really limit yourself as far as what heat and I guess thermal units you have available at the end of the season to get that corn to that final, you know, from 20 to 15. If you're not in that window to what Purdue and those resources have, it's really, really hard, short of having a abnormal fall. And I would say stick with the averages. We've been blessed to have some really good falls lately, but all it takes is that one wet, cold fall, and you're probably going to be a pretty miserable person. So play the averages and adjust your maturities there if you had some replant, if you're worried about that. Because to your point, as we were discussing, when you were looking at May 25th versus June 1st versus June 10th, it's hold the line, and then all of a sudden it's
time for Plan B.
Time for Plan B. Or Plan C.
Right. So yeah, those definitely had a handful of phone calls about that this week as well. So we also had phone calls talking about some corn and soybeans that got hailed on. The good news is we're early enough in the season. I just wanted to bring up the fact that Iowa State has machines that replicate hail damage, and there's lots of studies that they've done with them over the years. So if you wanted to give either the just Iowa State University soybean hail chart, or corn hail chart, they have lots of good resources. But for the majority of the stuff that, I think the one was actually east of St. Louis where we saw hail damage, and it was below the V6 stage, and it's not pretty to look at, but there's very limited yield robbing that is happening at that point. The growing point's below ground. A lot of the time those leaves would eventually fall off, or they're not going to be super important when it comes to collecting sunlight for the ear leaf anyway. So not a huge deal, but it's something that I wanted to talk just a little bit about today, that we're probably in that stage where it's early enough. And the hail damage pictures that I've seen, the hail wasn't hard enough. When you get a yield damaging, the only time you'll see yield damage coming from hail damage at that stage is if it's actually taking plants out. So you get that softball size hail where it's actually reducing stand. That's what you need to look for. I haven't seen any of those where it looked like it was actually reducing stand. It looked like it just stripped the leaves for the most part. So and that comes up with the next question. And Turk, you've probably had this question 100,000 times over the course of your career. Do I put a fungicide on?
Mm-hmm.
So, do you have an opinion on that when it comes to corn?
My opinion is yes, you do. Just simply because I think that it does help. The biggest issue that you're going to have with hail, big hail like you're talking about, is the bruising of the stalks. And I think, in my opinion, it does pay to put that on now. Iowa State may have a different opinion, but in my opinion, the guys that did that were better off than the guys that didn't.
Yep. And they have like 7 to 10 days is what they really want you to wait. And the reason for that is you want whatever leaves that are there, that are in the furrow, you want them to start to unfurl so you can actually get some coverage on the new growth rather than spraying fungicide on the ground that's not going to do anything.
Right. That's the comfort. How much is going to actually get to the ground when you do spray it. So, but again, fungicides are fairly inexpensive. And now compared to the yield loss that you could take from that corn going down later on in the year.
Right. Anything to keep that corn plant healthy. The one thing that I would like to add on top of that is the fact that, you are now missing leaf 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, but what's in the whirl is leaf 6, 7, 8, 9, and potentially 10. That's all wrapped up that you could potentially, depending on when the hail hit, you have at least 3 or 4 leaves that are going to be more readily exposed. Now we're starting to talk about the leaves that may contribute a little bit more to yield. And if we're in a hot, wet year like what is projected from multiple different forecasters, you want to protect those leaves because that's where the yield starts to come into, and you want to protect those leaves from tar spot and things of that nature. And because it's kind of a fallacy that when crops get hailed on, you have lesions now that are available for fungal spores and things like that to get into. That's kind of a fallacy because tar spot, gray leaf spot, northern corn leaf blight, all of those diseases, they don't need infection points. They don't need tears to create lesions. They can do that without. It's more like the bacterial diseases. So spraying a fungicide isn't going to stop any bacterial diseases, and bactericides are expensive, and they're not something that's really happens in row crop production. So it's more about protecting the leaves, protecting the solar panels that potentially could collect sunlight and be putting sugars into the year later on in the season.
And if you wait until you actually see it, you've already missed the window for the application. So
right. So things to think about when it comes to that on corn. Soybeans is kind of another one of those deals. When they're young like this, you got to be looking for bruising in the stem like what you were talking about on corn. But the majority of the time, you really don't see any yield damage to soybeans until you get into the later R stages. It's incredible how much defoliation. I think Iowa State has it. We could throw the chart up. Iowa State has on their soybean hail damage chart where when we are in the V1, let's even call it V3, V4, because that's how far some of these would have been along. You can get up to 70% soybean loss, and that would be nodes cut or broken off of the plant. You can get 70% of those taken off, and we're still less than 20% yield loss on the soybeans.
Yep.
So one of those deals where soybeans are super elastic in how they build yield. A huge component of it is getting the stand that you want at the beginning and the rainfall at the end. The stuff that happens in between, soybeans are tough. In that standpoint.
And I agree with that 100%. I think soybeans can take a lot more hail than what corn can. Corn can take a lot of hail early, but when you get later on in the season and you get hail on corn, it can take a lot of yield in a hurry.
Right. And if it's a light hail, well, they have another chart here that talks about leaf area destroyed. Mm-hmm. Even at R1, which we're probably a month away from with the later planted soybeans, you can have 50% of the leaf area destroyed and have less than 5% yield loss for the light hail.
Right. It's that hail that happens at tasseling time that really gets you.
Yep.
It'd be important too to go and look at resources on the actual percentage of leaf damage, because what we would probably think would be 50% damage really isn't 50% damage. It takes a lot of damage to get to. You got it right there.
Yep, Iowa State has it all when it comes to this hail. They're a great resource when it comes to hail.
Exactly. Yep.
So Alex can throw that picture up when you're sitting
I think
there
that's a great picture, because you look at 30% on that, and most people, I'll be in that boat. Oh man, that's got to be like 70% of that gone, and the surface area is just so robust that we take that, I guess, for granted a little bit.
Yeah. So those are a couple of things that I had going on this week. Turk, what you got going on?
I just want to remind everybody that we are in June. And that means everybody that has not checked their bins in the last 2 or 3 weeks, because they're trying to concentrate on getting that crop in, needs to get out there and check any corn or beans that are in the bin and give a sniff and kick the fans on and smell and see what's going on, because this is the time of year where we always hear somebody started unloading their bin and it wasn't pretty coming out. And so very important to check those bins, and also be thinking about your marketing plan, because again, Father's Day weekend is usually the weekend that the markets can take a dive pretty suddenly, depending on the forecast. Right now we're in that time of year where we're concentrating on what the forecast is for the next 2 to 3 weeks, 4 weeks out, and that forecast can make a big difference in what that market's doing. And so if most people that have got their stuff in the ground, it's looking pretty good, isn't it, Ben? And so the potential is there for a really good crop, and it can go down in a hurry. So be at least thinking about it. If you have grain in the bin that has to move before fall, you need to have a plan for it by Father's Day.
Yeah, completely agree with you there. The other thing that you and I were talking about earlier this morning, things that are happening right now, there's a lot of side dressing going on. You want to give a little bit of your thoughts on the advantages of side dressing and opening up that soil.
Well, when you have the heavy rains like we've got right now, just running a side dress bar, whether it be a rolling bar or a knife machine, either one of them will open up that soil and get that help start drying that out. I mean, the planter does a little bit, especially if you have the strip till type planter, but that'll help a lot on drying things out and getting that aerobic bacteria going in the soil. When it's wet like this and you don't have anything going on, those soybeans can look pretty pale and pretty yellow until the ground starts cracking. And so even going out there and with anything in a soybean field can help perk those beans up to get some air in the soil. I mean, we're really looking for air in the soil.
Right. I've had fields that I've been keeping pretty close eye on over the past 2 weeks. It seems like 2 days after the applicator goes through, and you know that the nitrogen, that the roots aren't intercepting that nitrogen that quickly. It's opening up, getting air into the soil, allowing that to dry out at a 3-4 inch depth. The corn perks up, straightens out, looks a lot darker green almost immediately. So if you have smaller corn and you're in those situations where you've had excess moisture, I would suggest side dressing a little bit earlier. If you normally wait till V6, V7, to try to push that window as late as possible. I mean, that's what I prefer, because then you're making the decision as late as possible with nitrogen, which is what you want to do, because that's the later you wait, the more changes you can make with that application. But just from an opening the ground up standpoint, don't let the corn start to go backwards, because if it starts to go backwards, it's going to be going backwards going into the V4, V5, V6 time frame, and that's when you're setting kernels around. So I would be a little bit more aggressive. I would suggest to be a little bit more aggressive when it comes to the side dressing time frame. Try to make time for that, because it's definitely going to help the corn.
Lots of things can be happening all on the same day. Planter, side dressing, spraying.
Yep. You just got to figure out how to have enough guys and enough equipment.
I do not envy the retail guys right now.
Yep.
They are.
They're doing their best.
Burning the world down as best they can. Definitely an unenviable spot.
Right. So we covered a lot of topics there. Lynn, do you have a joke, since Joe is out on assignment, correct?
Got a couple of them, and it all has to do with the events of last night. Last night when I was getting ready to leave the field, I saw fireflies for the first time.
I actually saw fireflies last night for the first time too.
So very important to see fireflies. For those at home that don't know, fireflies typically are indication that we need to start looking out for corn rootworm. So a little bit of an agronomic plug there going into the joke, and these are bad. These are really bad, but I'm going to try my best here. So why did the spider eat the firefly?
No idea.
It wanted a light snack.
There you go.
What is the #1 Firefly pickup line?
No idea.
You are so flashy tonight.
Well, that will finish us off for this week. I hope everybody's staying safe out there. There's a lot going on, a lot of equipment rolling down the road. We appreciate you tuning in on YouTube or our podcast if you're listening in. And there's a lot going on. Try to be safe, and we will catch you all next week.